Okay guys, let's dive in. This is going to be the first of a three-part series. The first is going to be looking at our brands and intellectual property. It's really important because I think that's a way that we can demonstrate how we've set the foundation around these pieces. And then the second phase of this is going to be looking at the services and the different revenue streams. And then lastly, we're going to look at corporate growth. So we'll take a look at how we're going to deploy a strategy that gets us back into compliance with the OTC and all the other things surrounding that, including a deep look at how all of these pieces fit together. So I've got some products here in front of me. I'm gonna be holding them up and showing you, talking about the different intellectual property, the things that we have in our collective umbrella, and how we've utilized a lot of experience to develop these products out and why they're so important for our long-term strategy as a company. In fact, I would go as far as saying they're the bedrock of our company going forward. So I wanna take a look at all of these things and give you guys a better understanding of what we have to provide to the market and who we are as a company. So let's get started. So the reason I wanted to do this video is because I was getting so many people reaching out and saying, well, what have we been up to? What products do we have? Have we done anything new? And I sensed that there's some frustration out there amongst shareholders, but at the same time, we were sort of frustrated because we do have so many brands and we've launched so many different things across different platforms that a lot of times when we were sharing that information, it wasn't crystal clear to us whether or not we'd be sharing that as a GreenLink milestone, or if we would be talking about it from the perspective of the actual brand. So for example, when Groovy Chews, which is one of our more successful products, was rebranded recently, we added CBD to the mix. So we did a 20-to-1 CBD to THC ratio and then licensed that IP into the Washington market, and it was widely accepted. The orders have been fantastic, and so have the orders for CBD. So as a supplier of resources to these licensed entities, it was a huge success for us. We felt like that information was made known to the collective group of shareholders and really anyone for that matter, because we were on the social media accounts for Groovy Chews, teasing out this new product, posting pictures of it, talking about it, and of course, getting testimonials from users and consumers and trying to share that information in the stories. And we realize when we share stuff on stories, it's only there for a brief period of time. So in an effort to kind of collect all of this information and make life a little easier for ourselves and for you as a shareholder to kind of track the progress of the company, we will be utilizing one kind of centralized hub for the information, probably Instagram, where we will reshare and make available the different information from the different brands and services that we provide. Because I think it's only fair to assume that someone in Canada may not be tracking the Groovy Chews Instagram channel or the Jamrock Instagram feed or Rocket Cones, and the list goes on and on and on. So in order for us to kind of collectively share that information and have one, let's call it a stream of consciousness for our shareholders, we're going to create a GreenLink Instagram that will catch all of this stuff in one bin. And you don't have to track every move. Some of you don't care to do that, but some of you probably would like to see the forward progress as it moves forward. So taking a look at all of this, I want to continue to dig into the brands and show you a few things that we've been developing and what's coming next and how we're going to incorporate that into the bigger picture. So before we dig in, I want to talk to you guys about how and why this became such a big deal to me and why I think it's one of our key advantages as a company. I was doing some advisory work for, a lot of you probably know who it was, but I was offered an advisory board role with one of the big three companies in the space. It's safe to say that everybody knows who they are. What I kept seeing over and over again is they're bringing these ideas before me to essentially vet them. It'd be some products, but mostly packaging, design, but centered primarily around large production facilities. And it was the infrastructure for gardens, how to grow the most flower, have the biggest fields or warehouses, and on and on and on this went. And as I kept seeing more and more things come over the wire, everybody was focused on production, production, production. And almost every move they made was done in a way that was designed to attract investor dollars. I didn't feel like they were making earnest attempts to grow their brands. I didn't feel like they were trying trying to find connectivity with consumers as much as they were exciting headlines that would drive more investment. And ultimately, of course, the investment was to create brand awareness and build relationships with consumers. But I just felt like every time I left a meeting, I would bring different partners. I flew one of my close friends back from New York to participate in this whole project for almost 2 years. And we would get in the car and look at each other and I just don't feel like they have any desire to connect with the consumer. Everything is about raising money, and I think that's a fundamental flaw in the business model. And what we've seen is that play out over and over again, particularly throughout Canada, where everything was about how big is the grow, how much production do you have, and they were placing dollar amounts on that. And it just seemed like I'd already been through that exercise. I had retail stores, as all of you know, in the late 2000s and up until about 2016, I was running medical shops, and very, very successful medical shops. We were rated 4.9 out of 5 with over 300 reviews on Leafly. We were just widely accepted as one of the best retail stores you could find, both our Seattle and Issaquah locations. But over the course of the first couple of years, edibles were not a big thing for us. The brands weren't all that important. Having access to flower was. It was brand new. It was very exciting for everyone. So we were able to kind of build out a really successful store on flower. But then we kind of flatlined. The other thing I noticed was these growers that were coming in, they would have bad batches that would be renamed as a different strain, or they would be interested in seeing if anyone was willing to wholesale it in bulk because they didn't want to diminish their brand. And what I've seen over the course of all of my experience is that every grower lays an egg once a year. They usually have one harvest that either gets infested with bugs or there's a change in the rules on what they're allowed to use as far as treating the plants themselves. And they've got to harvest and then wholesale the product off. And we kind of became poachers in that market because what we were doing was buying that stuff at a discount and then extracting it. So anything that was not right with the flower never really translated to our products because our extraction methods worked around any of those issues. Nothing passed through into the finished product. And we found that the profit margins were great on the edible side, but the consumers weren't really buying very many of them. So as an experiment, and I think what really makes me someone who's unique in the space is I began collecting that data and looking at our average daily transactions and trying to figure out, well, people are not going to consume more flower just because I want them to. They kind of know what their consumption rates are. But edibles are relatively new to them. So it felt like flower was low-hanging fruit, and that's what everyone was focused on. So in 2009, I formed Sweet Nirvana Bakery, and we started making edible products. They were made with butter. It was very crude the way it was done from the standpoint that there wasn't a lot of consistency. You can't really get a consistent product making it with butter. So we decided that we would start to look at alternative ways of doing mass extraction so we could test one batch and make sure that our products had the same consistency across the platform for months and months at a time. And it allowed us to kind of buy down the dollar cost average of producing this oil. We could buy in bulk, convert in bulk, and then we would know we would have consistent edibles for a long stretch of time. So the background is kind of set. You understand that it's for efficiency, consistency, low cost, but more importantly, it was how we drove new margin into our retail stores and developed deep relationships with our customers. So by the time this was done and we were shuttering our doors because medical was no longer allowed in Washington and I was headed out to focus primarily on the project we have going on today, when those days come, we were able to analyze what had happened over that 5-year period, and the growth was slow and steady, whereas flower numbers never really changed. As we got bigger, of course, the sales numbers tracked with that. But as we grew as a company, we continued to grow the average transaction, and it wasn't done with flower, it was done with edibles. So we started deploying these strategies that allowed us, much like the retail counter at a grocery store, these grab-and-go items on the way out. They're low cost, but it helps drive margin for the retailer. So we decided we would focus on creating products that fit into those little pockets where we knew a consumer was going to an ATM to get out $60. They can only get denominations of 20. So we knew they were getting $60 and their transaction total was $52. There's $8 in there. And if every single thing on the shelves was $10, $12, they weren't buying anything with that. and people weren't likely leaving $8 tips. So we started making products in single serve packages. So these Jamrocks here, that'll focus at some point on them. These guys here are a single serving candy product that are just a couple of bucks, particularly in that day, I think they were $4. And then we would make a variety of different products. We had pre-rolls that are sold in 5-packs like this, but they're also sold in individual strips, kind of like this here. And those products were a tearaway. It was $7 for a pre-roll back in those days. And we found that the average person, based on the average transaction, usually had between $7 and $9 coming back to them. So we made products that targeted that $7 to $9. Once we established that relationship where they would buy a single serving product, we could then get them to come back and buy the big bottles. And so they were buying 10 packs of these products and dramatically expanding the average price per spend in the store. So granted, we don't do much retail business activity, but we are making products specifically for those relationships. And there are some regions of the country where we will eventually participate in that, but we're waiting on some rule changes federally and locally before we really cross that line and deal directly in cannabis products and cannabis-derived revenue. And we focus on the intellectual property, the brands, the services, the real estate, and the licensing of each of those things into these licensed entities. So, as we're developing out these products, we developed a product called Liquid Gold. So we don't sell it under this brand anymore. That's been used 1,000 times. But effectively what we were doing is we were extracting very large harvests all at once, particularly outdoor flower. It has a higher terpene profile and more active cannabinoids than indoor flower does. And so it doesn't look as visually appealing. It gets a little bit washed out. The UV rays kind of darken the pigment of the green, and it just doesn't have that same pop and appeal that high-end indoor flower does. But from a useful standpoint, as far as we were concerned, it was a lower cost to produce, higher yielding, and of course, if you're just going to extract it anyway, you don't have to sit there with scissors and finely trim all of it. We take the tops, that goes to market in high quality branding like this, what we consider like a high quality outdoor product. And the rest is made into oil, which becomes a wide variety of our other products. So kind of looking at the other products, I think a lot of people have asked, well, why is it that we're primarily focused on Groovy Chews, Jamrocks, Rocket Cones, and RSO? And for example, the Groovy Chews are a chewy candy, kind of like a gummy candy. We're not allowed to say gummy in certain regions of the country, so it's a pectin-based chewy candy. We've got individual pre-rolls and packages. The Rick Simpson oil is kind of the heart and soul of our recipes. We sell that so that consumers can use that for medical purposes. And then, of course, we've got the smaller hard candies, which I've shown you guys a couple of times. And the reason we focused on those products is because the rules change all the time. Some of you may have even seen my Twitter a couple weeks ago where I was talking about one product, and it's these Groovy Chews. We had to change the recipe a little bit, and we had to change to new bottles. So when we do that, keep in mind there are 5 flavors, there are 3 different sizes, and you've got an indica, a sativa, a hybrid, and then a high CBD version. So when you factor in all of those variables, it's not one product change. It ends up being hundreds of SKUs that are affected, and each of them has a different label design, different information, different quantities, nutrition facts, all of the things that are related to that. So when I look at a product, it's not just, wow, that's a nice product on a shelf, great branding. It's how scalable is it? Can we take it to new markets? Does it require a supercritical CO2 extractor? Do we have to have outside partners beyond the licensed entity in the region that we're looking to expand into? All of those things come into play with every product we make. So historically, when I owned the retail stores, I could come up with a product idea and we would have it on the shelves inside of 3 weeks, and we could find out very quickly whether it was something of interest to people. We would vary the dosages and quantities and the prices and play all kinds of different games and find out what consumers liked. And after doing all of that and then going and experiencing some of these large companies who were literally just guessing at what consumers wanted, or even more dangerous was relying on a lot of these marketing companies to give them the data. I can't tell you how many times I went into these marketing companies. I'm not going to say their names specifically. I'm going to talk about some that I really liked, but a couple of them, they sat down and said, "Oh, these are all wrong. The price of a pre-roll right now is like $25. Nobody wants to buy a $25 pre-roll in a bag like this or in one of these tearaway cardboard packs. You've totally missed the market." I said, "No, I'm missing the market for today, which is an artificially inflated market because Washington had only been in the legal game for about 4 months. We were one of the first people to come to market with product, and yes, the prices were sky high. If they were still drawing the kind of prices that we were getting in the early days of the market, I don't know that you'd even know who I am because we were making so much profit at those price points. It was hard to imagine ever needing to pivot. But I just kept telling them that what we're seeing today is artificial. It's going to commoditize. It's going to come down. There's going to be large grows, ours included, at the end of the year where we will be harvesting thousands of pounds and our profit margins at the price points we were at were strong. And so I kept getting that's not the right consumer. There aren't people out there looking for $5, $10 pre-rolls. They're just going to the black market for that. And I just thought, that's short game, short game, short game. And I've been in this long enough to watch the trends and see what's happening that I think what happened in those 4 or 5 years, I guess it's closer to 6 years on the retail side for me in the medical market, I was just going to see that play out in a much shortened period of time in the recreational market. So we knew Washington was going to be the most strict. They've proven to be. And it seemed like if we could figure out how to crack that nut, we could really do it anywhere. So we are now the fruits of all of that labor and seeing what has to happen to these brands, what has to happen to the packaging as the rules evolve and normalcy starts to come about through the industry. We can take a good hard look at the overall value of flower and how or whether or not it impacts our products at all. We're far more elastic to price in the edible market than we are in flower. That's a fact. For reasons I mentioned earlier, as it relates to failures in the garden, which just happens. You've also got outdoor crops, which may have really great seasons in some years and have pretty terrible seasons in others, depending on the weather. So all of those things play a role in this. But to be honest with you, for the business model that we've put in place, failures on the part of gardens, let's just, in Canada, if Tilray was to have a horrible quarter, which has happened. I'm talking about growing here, not in their financials, but if they were to have a horrible quarter of growing, they're not likely to just strip down their brands and sell everything 30% less. They're more likely to wholesale that out the back door to another producer processor who would make secondary products out of it. And I'm not knocking them specifically. It happens to every grow, but it's just a name that people know. Canopy, Aurora, MedMen, all these guys. So everyone has problems in their garden from time to time. But that actually plays into our hands as a company that either manufactures edibles or licenses with licensed partners to do so. It's just a great spot for us to be in. So as we look at the different areas of business that we think are going to grow exponentially, edibles is the category. Now, there's always going to be a place for flower, and we participate in that game as well, but we do it with limitations. And our primary focus is building long-lasting brands. And the one thing that when we ask those 300 people, it's really hard to get people to review your stores, by the way. If they're angry, they'll go say whatever they want about your products or your store. But if they really enjoy the experience, it's hard to get that information. So we made an effort for a couple of years to reach out to every person who had written a review and ask them what it was about us that they liked and why they seemed to feel so strongly about our store. And it was because they didn't feel like we were just selling them products. We were actually giving them advice on how to control their experience, and the products we were providing them had really high value because they were consistent. Think about that though. My motivation was to drive the average price per visit up. And I did so by selling them products, exactly what they claimed we weren't doing. The reason it worked is because we were selling them a good product, and it was something that we were doing consistently and working very, very hard to be out ahead of our competition with. And that is my point with what GreenLink is today and why our brands are different. I don't think the industry has matured at a national, even a global level, to where we can really start to hone in on the differences between our products and our competitive products, because we're still at this point where everything's overwhelming. The customers are new, the stores are new, the experience is new, the bud tenders. We're just now in Washington, after all these years, getting to a point where there's adequate staff at each of these stores that actually know a lot about cannabis. But I can tell you, I can walk into almost any store and just wow the heck out of these guys, because most of them don't understand the profiles of the plant and how it affects the overall experience. And so what we do, and I'm not giving away secrets here. If somebody really wanted to know this, they could figure it out on their own. But it seems to me that most of the industry is 100% comfortable buying THC distillate from a large extraction facility and peppering it into a number of different products, whether it's a cookie, a candy, a juice, whatever it is. The problem with that is it does not have any of the other terpenes and none of the other things that are found, think of them as essential oils in the cannabis plant, that actually affect the customer's experience. So you may get this really strong onset from THC, but the crash is also really strong. And it's the other terpenes that are found in the plant that help control that experience, how long and how strong. We call that the intensity and duration. And so we created all these models where we would track all of this stuff. And over the course of the years, it used to be guess and check. And now we have the technology and the extraction methods to actually identify each one of these individual compounds. So what we will do, for example, out at Big Ridge, our partners there will harvest thousands of pounds of material. Some of it will be destined to go to market, most of it hopefully under our house brand. Get in there. There we go. Our house brand that we license into them in our packaging, which we also sell to them. And that leads to revenue dollars for us as a company. But the secondary material that gets blasted, that's a term for extracted into oils, is done very specifically to be converted into Rick Simpson oil. Rick Simpson oil is a broad spectrum extraction, so you get all of the profile pulled into that oil. And what happens then is, just imagine a pickup truck worth of cannabis being converted into oil. So let's call that like a gallon or two of oil. We can do one comprehensive test on that oil, or they can do one comprehensive test, send us the reports, and then we build out profiles for the individual licenses to make our products to spec. So what happens there is we've created some economies of scale, because it's very, very simple for them. One batch test result, all of the information gets compiled, and we actually add the other terpenes to their profile so that it does what we expect and want that product to do. So for example, the indicas are going to have different terpenes added to the profile to control that experience, where the sativas, which are going to be more uplifting and energetic, are going to have a different profile. But either way, we also create the middle ground. So we kind of have best of all three worlds taken care of there. And then we lump in CBD into that equation. And so we can take isolate CBD that's been extracted and reintroduce it back into the THC products at the ratios that we want on a consistent basis. So we are not going to have issues where region to region, somebody who buys Groovy Chews are having a different experience. There may be different requirements on how much each dose can be. There may be differences in what the packaging can look like. But as far as the quality goes, when you attach yourself to one of our brands, you will get something consistent over and over again. Beyond consistency is the effective dose. That's another area of the business, because we can't fully advertise our products to start to really create product differentiation. We don't really have the full ability to exploit our competitors for their weaknesses, nor do we have the ability to kind of highlight our benefits. So the only way we can really do that is communication like this. We have some limited access to social media, meaning we can't advertise outside of our existing audience, but our native audience that comes to our brands can hear this story. Problem is you're already preaching to the choir at that point. But we've got some brand strategies built around social media and social media marketing that we think are going to help us penetrate beyond the buyers at the stores and the bud tenders who are actually selling the product, and actually get to the end user so that they're asking for our products in new stores. So we've really refined what was once hundreds of SKUs down to a handful that we can really manage down to the fine print to harness every recipe, make sure everything meets the strictest of standards, and that we can scale those in new markets. And now that we've done that, we are in the phase now where we're starting to introduce new products into the industry. I'm going to show you one right now. Before anyone like pauses and freeze frames this, I am going to just tell you, these are just prototypes. But historically, we have been very successful in the beverage category. I created a product called cannabis. And the short version of that is actually where a lot of the science that goes into these products started. I couldn't figure out how to get our oil in this form into a beverage because, of course, oil and water don't mix. And this is, of course, we can. We know how to do it. It's actually quite easy. But in the old days, that was a difficult process for us to figure out. So what I started doing was making alcohol extractions, but alcohol extractions are really weak. And of course, by the time you evaporate the alcohol and reintroduce it to a beverage, there's a risk of having some alcohol in that beverage. So I was trying to find out how to make this very weak juice that we'd created act and feel much stronger. And so I was using different extraction methods from mangoes and other things that have myrcene in them that we know breaks the blood-brain barrier and helps increase the intensity and duration of cannabis products. And so I was trying to make this weak juice that I'd created stronger. Well, it worked to a degree. It also worked in the sense that the other products people were consuming after drinking that juice were also more effective. And that launched this idea that, at least in our group, that we had a deeper understanding that the terpene profile and how these products were made were just as important as the actual high that you got from it. So how you got to that point, or how you, in particular those using it for a medication, how you could use that for a long time without developing too much tolerance to it. So we found out really quickly that there was more magic to it than just putting THC into a bottle. So what we've been working on lately, and again, these are prototypes. I'm actually using stickers from our lotion products just to set the prototype. But we're working on addressing the issues we had with the beverage, which is the overall quantity. People didn't enjoy drinking 12 to 16 ounces of a beverage, particularly for it to taste good. It's kind of sugary. The other problems we had were the bottles are the most expensive part. A bottle, depending on what scale you're buying, they can be very expensive, and it's hard to ship. There's just a lot of drawbacks to a beverage. It's heavy, but this is our solution, and I'm excited about it. So this is the first time anyone's seeing these. These are going to be a Suncliff branded. They're going to go out under the brand Sips. It'll be a Suncliff Sip, and the idea here is that these are just small. Get in there, guys. These are small beverages, grab and go. You can add them to a cocktail if that's what you want to do, which is fantastic, by the way, or you can just pop it and consume it. The difference with this is there's no, 80 cents to $1 on the bottle. The package is very, very inexpensive. To have these custom designed is another thing that's very inexpensive for us, and for the consumer to be able to pick and choose their favorite flavors and have them thrown on a Suncliff branded carabiner and throw it into a cooler. It's going to be a really exciting product. The other reason I'm big on this product is because we can also make it in a CBD only version. And I have found that the CBD beverages, the beverage market is an exciting category, and we've got bottling facilities in California that are ready to go on a major run of beverages for us. And I don't see the sell-through in that category as much as I'd like to, particularly in the CBD. It's a more crowded lane than people would think. But this is unique. The cost of manufacturing this is about 80% less than anything we do in a bottle. And because there's so much less volume, we're able to use a really high quality water product that will also be part of our sales strategy. And we can add terpenes to this to affect different experiences for the consumer. So not only will we have 5 or 6 individual flavors, we will have 4 individual experiences: calm, creative, energetic, and social. So no longer are we asking the consumer to come in and pick an indica or a sativa, which, quite frankly, I don't know how many of you watching this immediately know the differences between the two of those. But every single one of you knows the difference between calm, creative, energetic, and social. So that is the hallmark of the Suncliff brand, and one of the reasons why I was so aggressive in buying that company. I wanted to acquire that brand for many years. Ironically, I was doing some consulting work for a couple of other companies, and we were at this company, a branding firm called Green and Rubino. They had just started to develop out some canna brands, and they're very, very well known in our area of the country for quality branding, but they were kind of new to cannabis, and they showed me this concept they were working on for a company. Just kind of said, hey, let's, can't give it to you, but we can show you here in the office as kind of a brag reel of what they were working on. And they showed me this company, Suncliff. And I just loved everything about it. They talked to us about how it was really designed to be a nationally recognized brand, take down some of the stigma, fit into that lifestyle category. But I just felt like everybody was trying to do that and establish a lifestyle brand in the cannabis industry when there isn't a way to advertise that lifestyle very effectively. So I loved it. I wanted something like it. I just wasn't sure if that's what the industry needed. So we continued with our existing brands, refined those, redesigned, and worked with a couple of other outlets. Over the years, I've worked with Heckler, which works really closely with Privateer and Tilray. They did New Balance, Chateau Ste. Michelle. Starbucks is actually one of their clients. A number of big customers, and then CMA is another great branding firm. And in all of those experiences, I felt like we were sort of ahead of the market in that we were trying to build brands that were catering to kind of artificial price points and a lack of consumer diversity. We hadn't had soccer moms coming into the stores yet. And because you couldn't advertise this, I don't know how you would advertise this great kind of soccer mom friendly or new to cannabis friendly brand without the store being interested. And most of the buyers were old school medical dispensary owners like myself. So the buying patterns of the stores were kind of set in their way, but we knew in the long run that was going to change. So we have been working on this strategy for a long time. You guys have seen me tease the Suncliff vape carts, and I want to just take a couple minutes. I know I've been rambling forever, and maybe this is annoying to you. Maybe it's really beneficial, but I've got a list here, so you'll see me kind of peeking over the top of the camera. But our core brands all fit under the Sweet Nirvana brand's umbrella. So when I originally started, it was Sweet Nirvana Bakery, and it was just a chocolate chip cookie and a frosted pink cookie, and we ended up being about 100 products that fit, but it was all like Nabisco with just the name of whatever the product was. And we decided that we would refine that and kind of have our Nabisco be Sweet Nirvana brands, and then each individual product, like an Oreo or a vanilla wafer, they'd have their own freestanding brand. Which is what makes it hard to tell the story from the top, because, of course, when you've got that many brands and that many different things going on, they have to have their own independent channels of marketing and advertising. So it's hard to point everyone's attention at the right brands and at the right products, particularly when there's a new development. So just really quickly, of course, we've got Suncliff, and that includes their vaporizer cartridges, their high-quality flower. The way they've branded their flower, as if we don't have the brand under our umbrella now, but their flower is branded the same way. It has the strain name, but it falls under that calm, creative, energetic, and social, and that's like a higher-end greenhouse-grown flower, which is why, if you've been paying close attention, we've been expanding our partnerships out at the farm to include more greenhouse grows so that we have some kind of higher tier product to be offered under that umbrella. So there's a number of products that fall under Suncliff, but then you've got Groovy Chews, which is our non-gummy gummy candy, Jam Rocks, which is a hard candy, Rocket Cones that are the pre-roll joints, Big Ridge flour that I just showed you. Of course, we've got cookies in a wide variety of different flavors. The Puck, which is currently, it's not a summer product that we do, but think of like a vanilla Oreo cookie. You can see it. It's right here. It's amazing. It's got a cannabis leaf on it. When we took those away, partly just because they're hard to distribute in the summertime, not a lot of these retailers have refrigeration units, and of course, the delivery process is problematic for chocolate in our warm summers. So we've got some logistics to figure out there, and that's part of the reason why it's not a focus of what we're doing right now, because there are some scaling issues. And if we find any problems with scaling, then the product doesn't get shelved. It just gets moved down the priority list a little bit until either the market's matured to a point where it's not an issue, or we find a workaround for it. So Other products, we call them the bites category. We have peanut butter bliss bites. We have brownie bites, some of my favorite products. You can see the imagery there. Our sweet mint breath spray, I think we were a little ahead of the curve on the market there. Microdosing has become really, really popular, which is just a small dose or a single spritz of like a breath spray would get you just a couple of milligrams. And as opposed to being, let's just say, being very, very stoned for, a couple of hours, you would have this steady, consistent microdose, which is great for dealing with migraines or aches and pains and things like that. So I think the sweet mint breath spray will make a return at some point in the near future. Let me see the rest. Vape pens, I don't think any of you have seen our Firebird vaporizers. It was big in the medical category. There are some taxation issues that make it really difficult to sell a high-end vape product with cannabis already in it, because the vape pen also gets taxed at the same rate that the cannabis does. So you end up with a $300 item that should otherwise only be selling for $99. So there are other markets that will see those products and will bring back. I think we made, in my opinion, the highest quality vaporizer that I had ever seen, and this dates back quite a few years. And just the overall packaging and branding, it felt like a top shelf product, and it pairs up well with Suncliff, because I think Suncliff is a more friendly lifestyle brand, and Firebird is a more in-your-face, let's get it done type of vaporizer product. So we also have our disposable vape pens. We don't sell a lot of those these days. Again, some of it's because there's been some issues with the rules and laws around flavor additives. And again, if it's going to scale with problems, then we're moving it off to the side. It's part of our intellectual property. It's what we can bring value to other licenses and people who are looking to expand in the market. We could certainly relaunch those brands or take them to new regions, but it's important that, to me, that you guys know what Tasty Toke is. And there's actually a really cool little promo video. Hopefully I've got it queued up so I can show it to you right now. Anyway, that gives you an idea. The idea was that is not as strong as some of our other vaporizer products, but the flavor is extremely effective. And again, ran into some issues with that earlier in the year, and they now allow us to add flavors back to vape pens. So we'll come back and readdress that once we feel like that's what's most appropriate with our time and energy as it relates to this whole entire project. So moving forward, of course, I mentioned the cannabis beverages. We had Nirvana caps. Those came in a women's health version. We had a nighttime, a daytime, and a CBD version, which is just a pill form. You can see it here. Rebel rosin. We actually have a lot of experience making rosin. That's where you have no chemical added whatsoever to the flower. It gets put into a rosin press, smashed with about 20 tons of pressure, and the results of that are a really, really concentrated oil that comes off the plant. The price points in Washington don't really make sense to make a lot of rosin. Neither does it in Colorado. There's some companies that have made a go at it, but it's something that we've got a lot of intellectual property, and we've got some brands built around it. Our Rebel rosin was a big hit. Again, just didn't scale well. And then Nirvana nectar, which is just think of that as like a tincture. We don't actually sell that product in Washington. I'll go back and readdress that because it's one of my favorite brands. And it was a product that sold well in the medical industry. It's great for adding to smoothies and things like that. So we'll come back and readdress that. But again, we've really harnessed our focus down onto a few of our core brands. We're getting all of the packaging is actually being redone on everything. And the reason I keep harping on that is because it's really important to us that we control the packaging and the ingredients as much as we can, because most of these regions have restrictions on how much we can charge as far as a licensing or a royalty fee to the companies that are taking these products to market. That's important because we have certain distance we have to keep from the cannabis plant itself and the finished product and the sale of those products, but so do the licenses that we're working with. So my job is actually made exponentially more difficult from time to time because those rules change, and I have to figure out how we navigate those relationships and do so without losing any of our market share or any of the marketing programs that we put in place. They don't lose footing. So it can be very challenging at times. And if you see quiet periods from us, that's usually what I'm doing, is making sure that everyone is still in compliance and that we can continue to grow these brands and ultimately expand on our revenue streams. So I'm going to use Groovy Chews as the example today. It's one of my favorite products, and it's a pectin-based candy. What we've done historically is we had a wide range of products that we got from different areas. Some was using RSO, so we could effectively charge for the use of the intellectual property to get the RSO that we use. We can sell in the terpenes and the CBD. Those are not things that are disallowed by the LCB or any of the regulatory bodies. So as a company, we can go out and get these resources in bulk and make them available to the licenses. But for example, say you've got a 5 or 10% cap on your licensing fee that you can charge. That severely restricts our ability to drive revenue from the sale of these products because, of course, all we get is whatever that revenue stream is from the licensing fee. But you've got to keep in mind a lot of these companies are small, so their ability to go out and spend $20,000 or $30,000 on packaging is not there, which leaves them buying in small quantities at high prices. It requires them to go out and print one-off labels, hand apply most of this stuff. So if you look at this product, you figure that would be a sticker on the front, the back, and then of course you've got a barcode sticker, the store that it's going to, and then you have to have the not safe for children sticker, all independently done. And you figure how long that takes to apply all of those stickers really cuts into the profitability and the scalability of their enterprise. So that's where we come in. We've got the packaging, we buy it in bulk, so we're able to resell it to them labeled and ready to go at a lower cost than they can even acquire the actual physical bag for. Never mind the ingredients and the material that's used to assemble this. So whether that is a piece of machinery, whatever, and we're going to touch more on those revenue streams next, but I want it known and understood that we may not grow the cannabis that goes into this joint, and we may not even fill the joint, but the tube that it goes into, the package that it's in, the brand that it's under, and the recipe and formulas as well as the equipment used to do it may very well be ours in some instances. So that is how the brands fit into our story, in that if you were to go to Canada and build the largest production facility in the world, I don't know that I would ever advise that from the standpoint that you've got no evidence that anyone wants that product. Flower can certainly be a dead-end road in that if it's not up to par, you're going to have to drop the price, and depending on what you've got for packaging and labeling, you may not be able to do that, or what promises you've made to shareholders as far as margins go, you may find yourself walking back an awful lot of revenue over the next few years. So the strategy for us is to focus on the areas that we can really tightly control the profitability, as well as provide as many resources as we can to these individual licenses that allow us to create revenue streams for ourselves and really strong partnerships with the licenses themselves. So, excuse me, been going for a long time. The other thing I want to touch on, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we hold key intellectual property in a number of different areas, most notably around extraction methods. How we create the oil that we do is something that can be easily taught. It can be done with inexpensive equipment, but knowing our formulations and how we make our products is a big part of that. And it's something that we can turn over to licensed partners with very little cost to us. So if we're supplying the distillation equipment to be able to create RSO on site, I'm going to pick a random state like Florida. If we were to scale there, most of these companies are looking at our competitors and they want them to buy a supercritical extractor for $150,000, $200,000, or look at different ethanol extractors, a number of different things. And here we come in and say, listen, we're going to use organic ethanol, and we're using pretty basic distillery equipment to do this, but at the end of the day, using our methods, you're going to end up with a high quality full spectrum oil that already has a lot of those terpenes and cannabinoids in the finished material, and then you're going to utilize our terpenes and essential oils to customize each of those blends based on the formulas we provide to you, and then you're going to buy the packaging, the supplies, and all of the resources needed outside of the cannabis to make that product. at a price point that's probably more favorable to you than doing it on your own, and it still leaves room for margin for us. So when you factor that in along with the real estate and all of the other intellectual property we have as it relates to gardening, nutrient creation, feeding schedules, strains, and again, it's not about having strains, which we do have a rather extensive library of strains that we've cultivated over the years. I don't really care who possesses those strains. It's knowing how those strains react to different environments that's the real value. So when someone comes to us and says, listen, we want to scale our operation and I like this strain, this strain, this strain, I said, that's great. That's like saying you like Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and Jaguars, but at the end of the day, what you're really trying to do is get 6 kids to soccer practice, so you need a minivan. So our ability to identify what the goal is for the finished product, identify the market price and what it's likely to be because we just have a ton of experience, and how that price elasticity affects your profitability and scalability, that's our specialty. So I think I'm as well versed in this practice as anyone I've ever met. And I still face challenges in this area. Everybody has misses. We all go through it. But I sit with a lot of intelligent people. I get to work with a lot of different marketing firms. I still have friends working in these firms calling and saying, hey, so-and-so came in. They're working on a product. I'm not divulging anything. But what would you do in this category? And every single time, I get a huge thank you. I can't tell you how much it's helped my business to have access to you. And all I'm really doing is kind of giving them the bits. I consider that the coins that are falling out of our pockets. It's not stuff that I think highly proprietary. But again, my experience tells me that the market is still basically just trying to pull in as many big headlines as they can for as much investment as they can possibly get, while we're out here building real brands that people love. We're figuring out how to market these things through social media, build an infrastructure that's going to support us long term, and heaven forbid, and I think that day is coming, where there's a federal rescheduling and we can actually acquire these licenses and take over a lot of the manufacturing and distribution. You're going to see these revenue streams go from a portion of sales to possibly the entire sale. And what that does to our market cap will be staggering. I think when the market finds out that we don't have debt and that we're revenue positive, I think that's going to be a huge response for us. And we can't go out and market that information right now. You know that part of the corporate strategy in the third episode is going to be covering a lot of that. So I'm not going to go into that at length, but I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything. I'm trying to do these just rapid fire so that they're going to be about an hour a piece. And if I'm doing a lot of editing, it'll turn these into 3-4 week projects. So this hopefully we'll be able to hit in successive weeks and continue to give you guys more and more information. I'm going to take a quick look, make sure I haven't missed anything. I want to touch on this very briefly because it's the thing that's got me the most excited. I touched on intellectual property and brands as it relates mostly to the THC industry, but I think our biggest area of advantage is a deep understanding of how these terpenes, cannabinoids, and other applications of the cannabis plant can be converted to the textile industry and the medical industry. And I think in the next year or two, we are going to see some breakthroughs on that category, and I fully expect that it's our company that's leading the charge on a lot of that. And I'm going to stop on that subject right there and just kind of let that marinate. But it's something that we are taking very, very seriously, and it's getting a lot of our time and energy right now. And I hope to be able to share the fruits of that labor with you guys over the next year or two. But it's definitely some cutting edge stuff, and it's something that I think has possibilities of being a real game changer. So we're going to continue to focus on those areas as well as the brands and develop our intellectual property. And I look forward to sharing the journey with you guys. I appreciate you. I'm glad we were able to have this conversation. I look forward to talking about the different services and the revenue streams. A lot of what we talked about today has set the foundation for us to have that conversation. So as you begin to understand how we take these brands and leverage... I lost my candies. It's my birthday today, so I'm going to be eating some of these. But we're going to leverage these things in a way that drives revenue for the foreseeable future and allows us to participate in regions of the country and regions of the world that we might otherwise not be allowed to participate in. So very excited about the future, still absolutely engaged with this project. Everyone involved is very, very excited, and we hope you are too. I know there's been some frustration along the way. I share in that frustration. I'll remind everyone that all of my shares and all of my interest in this company are kind of bound and tied until we are at a different stage as it relates to the OTC. I take that very seriously. We're working on it. But yeah, we're here for the long haul. We anticipate this being a very big year for GreenLink, and hope everyone's doing well despite COVID and some of the challenges in our country right now. So the best to all of you, and we'll talk to you next week. Take care. Bye.